In most haunted house horror films, the family dog is the first to sense something supernatural. It barks at empty corners, stares at nothing, and reacts to dangers its owners can't see. Usually, the dog survives. Sometimes, it doesn't. Either way, we always leave the dog behind and follow the humans for the rest of the story. Good Boy asks a different question. What if the entire movie stayed with the dog? By immersing us in a canine perspective, it turns loyalty into its greatest horror. And honestly, it's more unsettling than any jump scare. The film opens with Indy noticing danger before any human does. Lights flicker in the room, the TV cuts to static. The camera stays glued to him, though. Human reactions? Irrelevant. Indy's body language dominates the moment. He huddles, stares, stiffens. That's the brilliance of the opening. We aren't scared because we understand the threat. We're scared because Indy does. When humans finally intervene, the perspective never shifts. Indy remains alert, focused on a presence we can't see. Whatever is there with his owner hasn't left. This opening isn't just exposition. It establishes the rule. If something is happening, the dog perceives it first. And if Indy is afraid, so are we. At Todd's grandfather's house, the setting isn't a neutral backdrop. It's a pre-existing threat, filtered through Indy's senses. From the driveway, he hesitates to leave the car. He resists entering the home and reacts to sounds Todd seems to be unable to hear. Inside, the house is overwhelming, cluttered, dark, and maze-like. The camera stays low, maintaining a dog's eye view. From Indy's perspective, the house isn't just large, it's unsafe and unknown. Here, the supernatural becomes playful, almost taunting. Shadows linger, and sounds lure Indy away from Todd. And the entity doesn't hide, it wants to be seen by Indy. Todd reassures him. It's creaking pipes, faulty wiring, old house sounds. But every explanation widens the gap between human perception and canine awareness. Indy must choose between following Todd or following his instincts. Every time he chooses Todd, that loyalty becomes the tension's focal point. The film expands to the woods, yet safety isn't there. At the family cemetery, Indy hesitates, whimpering and signaling danger, again unseen by Todd. Mr. Downs, the neighbor, appears helpful but subtly unsettling. His fox traps are mentioned casually, but the imagery lingers. Foxes become a motif mirrored in Indy himself. Nova Scotia duck-tolling retrievers mimic foxes to lure prey, clever, attentive, and loyal. Indy mirrors this behavior, following danger without realizing it. As night falls, Todd's frustration surfaces. Indy reacts to a presence. Todd snaps, not out of cruelty, but fear and exhaustion. The real horror emerges, and it's not the house. It's the erosion of trust between a dog and his human. Loyalty trapping Indy. That night, watching an old black and white horror movie, a narrator explains how dogs once protected humans from unseen dangers. On the surface, it's obvious, but through Indy, it's tragic. Protection now equates to exposure to danger. Bandit, the grandfather's dog, appears in visions, gentle, mournful, and a warning. Loyalty didn't save Bandit, and it won't save Indy. Indy's day becomes a vigil. He stares out the window, waiting for Todd's return. Hours pass, and he doesn't move an inch. Loyal, patient, worried. That night, Bandit returns, not aggressive, not monstrous, but guiding Indy towards clues in the house. Flashes of the past appear. Todd's grandfather, lost dogs, hidden dangers. Bandit stayed, and Bandit perished. The lesson is clear. Loyalty can be fatal. Todd's condition deteriorates. Fear and illness growing worse. Indy attempts to comfort after a long day, Todd pushing him away, finally snapping, "Get the fuck out of here." Indy retreats, but stays in the room, eyes fixed to Todd. When Todd enters a trance by the basement door that night, the roles reverse. Indy is alert, protective, and Todd is the one who is lost and confused. Here, horror becomes relational. Indy can't fix the events, only witness and respond. The suspense tightens, unbearable because we understand more than Todd, yet can't intervene. Later, the house quiets. An old recording of Grandpa discussing his will plays. Grandpa coughs, then Todd coughs. A parallel emerging, not just inheritance of property, but of fate. Indy traces sounds to a storage room, Grandpa appearing before him, calling Indy by Bandit's name before yelling at him to run. And down below in the basement, a muddy hand crawls upward. Indy snaps back to the present, only to see a muddy skeleton rise behind him. Indy isn't just sensing danger anymore, he's observing the past. Understanding this, though, doesn't give him power, it amplifies his responsibility. Water seeps into the basement, Todd calling for Indy, who obeys despite the accumulated horror. Indy is found muddy and withdrawn behind the door, handled without question. Todd bathes him, telling him he smells like death. Then Todd coughs blood onto Indy in the tub, the threat erupting from Todd himself. At the hospital, Indy sits in Todd's lap as doctors deliver clinical fatal information. Indy grows more uncomfortable, jumping from Todd's arms, and causes Todd to snap, not out of cruelty, but frustration and helplessness. The room darkens and the doctor disappears. The muddy entity appears before Indy. The implication is subtle but chilling. The entity no longer requires the house, it is leached into Todd. Back home, Todd digs into the earth while Indy watches from a distance. Mr. Downs approaches, asking what Todd is up to, and warns of his fox traps before telling Indy to be careful. The film plants consequences long before they fully manifest. Todd begins to unravel, and Indy remains loyal, but cautiously so. The bond is surviving, but obedience becomes its own danger. Todd tries to reclaim control, saging the house, rearranging furniture, moving compulsively. While Indy watches his owner, he sees a candle go out and the muddy skeleton appears to him. When he turns back to Todd, we can see his reflection crying on the TV. Indy sensing this instability and feeling of hopelessness. Noises come from downstairs that night. Indy investigates and finds light pouring from the basement. A whistle echoes from the doorway, drawing him closer. As he stares down, flashes reveal Todd at the bottom of the stairs, advancing upward in a moment of terror. Indy wakes on the floor in fear, a hand pulling him back under the bed, which turns out to be Todd restraining him in a long hug. His hand turns muddy as he pets Indy, Indy biting him not out of aggression but recognition. Todd recoils, commanding Indy to stay as he investigates the next room. Briefly seeing the entity on top of a wardrobe and mud splattering on the ground, Todd collapses. The ambiguity ends and the entity begins to act, Todd beginning to lose himself. Now separated from Todd by a door, Indy notices an open bathroom window. Against all of his training, he leaves. He jumps onto the roof, then to the bushes, sprinting toward Mr. Downs for help. Punishment follows that agency, a fox trap snaring Indy as he gets so close to Mr. Downs' home. As he struggles, a shadow approaches, the screen fading to black just as he gets near Indy. The next night, Indy is chained outside beside the doghouse. Todd stands barefoot, flat-voiced. Loyalty has become confinement. Todd goes inside and Indy watches, staring up at the bathroom window. He sees Todd's silhouette cough, and when he turns away for a brief moment, he looks back to see a ghostly figure watching him. A fox emerges from the woods, free and wild, drawing Indy's attention. Behind him, the muddy skeleton stands, showing that Todd is aligned with the entity, and Indy can't stop it. The skeleton attacks, knocking Indy off the doghouse. A muddy hand drags him back as he tries to run. As Indy struggles, he charges at the doghouse, breaking free and running back towards the house, loyalty guiding him toward danger, not away from it. Entering through the cellar, Bandit's skeleton confirms the warning. And upstairs, Todd confronts the entity, seeing shadows and muddy footprints approach. After a brief interaction with the entity, Todd stares out, looking for something, but Indy enters, Todd clinging to him and asking how he made it back inside. Brief clarity breaks through. Todd sees his own deceased body in bed, and messages flood his phone. Right as he's beginning to put the pieces together, we see a chain and muddy hands appear behind him that begin to drag him toward the basement. Indy, being loyal to a fault, follows. Going all the way down to the basement, to the cavern below, we hear Todd scream, and Indy enters. A moment passes before we see him pulling his owner from the darkness. The muddy skeleton begins to approach, but Indy stands guard, protecting Todd. Todd, realizing his fate, praises Indy for his companionship and whispers the word Indy has lived by: stay. Todd transforms into a muddy skeleton, and Indy remains seated at the cavern as the sun rises. Todd's sister Vera arrives, searching for her brother. She approaches the cellar and sees Bandit's skeleton. Indy reveals himself from the darkness at the bottom of the stairs. She calls out to him, but Indy hesitates. Loyalty pulls Indy back in as he hears a man's whistle echo, but survival pushes him forward, and he leaves. During the credits, Indy rides in Vera's car, head hanging out of the window looking mournful, when a man's whistle is heard and draws him back into the car. Good Boy doesn't punish Loyalty for being foolish. It punishes it because without agency, loyalty becomes obedience. And in a haunted house, obedience is the deadliest instinct of all. This movie is a beautiful study on loyalty. Its novelty draws you in, but its emotional weight keeps you there. Good Boy isn't trying to reinvent haunted house horror. It's telling a familiar story through a new lens, one full of heart, dedication, and the consequences of staying loyal even when danger is staring you in the face. It offers a fresh perspective on modern horror, showing what stories can look like when the protagonist isn't human, and it has a special actor carrying that emotional core from start to finish. I quite enjoyed this film. It definitely will pull at your heartstrings, and you will have so much sympathy for Indy. He really is a good boy. I think the title is very suiting for this film. And although it isn't a perfect story, there's enough there that you're rooting for Indy the whole time. If you haven't seen this, I highly suggest it. It is a refreshing take on the modern haunted house horror film. And if you have seen it, let me know what you thought down below. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you very much. And I will catch you in the next one.